The sun lay on the town like a hot iron. Dust rose in slow eddies, settling on the wooden porches, on the signboard that creaked with every breath of wind. Maria's hands smelled of earth and blood. Her fingers were raw where they had dug into the soft dark, where she had finally given shape to a place for Javier's bones. The grave looked too small under the wide sky. The locket she clutched was cold against her palm, its chain dulled by years and grief. She had thought herself finished, a woman in a hat of mourning, a shadow fixed at the edge of town. Love, she told the dirt, had come too late. If you come for stories about second chances, stay with this one. Voices threaded through the heat, low and sharp, gossip, pity, the small cruelty of those who need a story to explain a wound. They called her a curse. They said the widow brought misfortune like a second skin. Maria felt their eyes as if they were a wind pushing her toward the graveside, keeping her there like an anchor. The first horse made a staccato sound against the hard-packed mane. It cut across the hush like a blade. Men looked up. Women drew their shawls tighter. A rider tore into the square like a fist through paper, a cloud of grit thrown behind him. He rode low, head bent as if against a storm. He wore a coat that had seen too much road, and his cheek carried a pale, angry scar that split the skin like a riverbed. The horse's nostrils flared. The rider's eyes were black and precise. "Where is the widow of Javier?" he called, his voice carrying with the dust. It was a name like a bell. Heads turned. A dozen small judgments landed on Maria before she raised her face. She was already up, raw, wary, a blade-ready woman. Fear made everything bright and near. Diego el Lobo. The name slipped through mouths and carried the weight of other people's fears. Killers had names in this valley, and they kept them like talismans. Maria felt the town lean away from the man as if his shadow might stain the church steps. Her hands tightened on the locket until the metal made a thin sound. He dismounted without ceremony. His boots hit the earth with a sound like conviction. When Diego looked at her, it was not with the anger she had rehearsed for nights, but with a something that did not fit the stories. A slow, careful attention, like a man reading the face of a map he had once known and then lost. "You're Maria." His voice was plain. He did not name her curse. He did not call her widow by rumor. He said simply what everyone else had already said. She had a dozen ways to shut him out. She tightened her jaw into one of them. "What do you want?" He reached inside his coat and took out something small, wrapped in oilcloth. His hands were scarred, knuckles white against the cloth. He held it as if it might break, offering or defending she could not tell. People stepped back. The heat held them in a thin ring. For a long swallow of time, she thought the town would explode. She imagined the horse hooves, the shouting, fingers making vows of vengeance. Instead, he set the package on top of Javier's grave with a gentleness that contradicted the tales they told about him. The oilcloth came away to reveal a wooden box, worn at the corners. On its lid, faintly carved, were initials Maria recognized before she read them. J.R. Memories are quick to rise where the ground is soft. She saw the way Javier used to tilt his head when he whistled at her from the garden. She heard again the night when a second promise, made on a porch railing when the cicadas hummed, had been sealed with a small wooden token that Javier had kept in his pocket for luck. The token had been a foolish superstition. It had still been his. "You had it," she said, voice thin. Diego answered without ceremony. "He gave it to me, said I should look after it, said I'd know when to bring it back." Words folded around them. The townsfolk made room only because stories liked witnesses. Diego's face shifted for a moment, and for the first time Maria saw fatigue that had nothing to do with the road. It was a weariness that matched her own. He said nothing of killing or of blood. He spoke of duty and of a debt that had older lines than any rumor. Still, no one unlearned fear. A woman spat into the dust. A boy tugged at his father's sleeve and asked if the man with the scar was a devil. Rumor is a thing that tightens its grip when new facts arrive. It does not loosen easily. In the silence after Diego's small confession, the town hummed with the old story. The dangerous stranger, the grieving widow, the pattern that fit neatly in people's mouths. Maria thought of the other man, the one whose name she had not said aloud in years. Raúl. He had been a bright thing that promised futures and then left like smoke. He had taught her how to laugh in the plaza and then taught her the shape of abandonment. She had married Javier because Javier's steadiness filled the hollow Raúl left. She had loved, yes, but in a different language. This grief was not only for a husband, it was for all the chances she had let pass like loose cattle over a fence. Diego did not insist his motive be clean. He did not produce a confession that would explain away every rumor. But a small chain of things unfolded that made a different story possible. As he stood by the grave, the breeze lifted his coat and a scrap of fabric fell at Maria's feet. It was embroidered with the same pattern that had been on Javier's handkerchief years ago, a pattern Raphael had mocked as old-fashioned. Diego bent to pick it up. He smelled of smoke and iron and something else that did not belong to men who preyed on widows. He touched the locket at Maria's throat without asking, fingers hovering like a man asking permission instead of claiming property. In other times, such gestures would have been enough to buy a town's acceptance. Here, suspicion sat like a third person at every table. Still, the townspeople watched him as if his next move would shape their nightmares. He could leave, and their story would fit again into neat edges. Or he could stay, and the edges might blur. Maria's flashbacks were efficient, razor-sharp. A porch at dawn with Raúl promising the moon. A winter when Javier's hand had steadied the rifle that was now folded in the dirt. A late-night argument over a jar of pickles, small and intimate, that had ended with a kiss and the sense that maybe finally, home. Grief arrived later, sudden as a storm. There was no time to plant a new garden between the old one and the thaw. Diego's shadow slid between a rumor and a truth. He spoke then, low. He asked me to look after things if he didn't come back. Said there were things worth holding on to. Said don't let her throw herself away over a ghost. Why would he say that? Maria asked, the words like mineral in her mouth. Because he trusted me. Diego's laugh was flat and quick. He said I'd do what was necessary. I thought that was a man boasting in a bottle. He looked at the grave. I was wrong. There were small proofs, planted earlier like crying seeds. The wooden box with Javier's initials. The handkerchief stitched with the same pattern. The fact that when he walked the perimeter of the town, he kept his back turned away from those who whispered. The way he watched the sky, as if he expected a neighbor to appear from the horizon. They did not absolve him of what he had once been, but they made it possible to see him as something else. A man who had learned his way toward an obligation, late and clumsy, and who now tried to place it where it would matter. The town's pressure mounted. A man from a neighboring ranch had come to town years ago with blows on his conscience and stories of Diego's teeth. He stood, chest out, and spat a warning about keeping company with killers. Someone on the street called for law. The word danger was thrown like a stone. For a moment, Maria saw the horizon split. Diego riding away with the dusk, the token tucked away, and her fate sealed again to the label of widow. Or she could stand there and risk the town's scorn for whatever fragile thing this might become. Diego moved toward his horse. The gesture was the hard edge of goodbye. He swung his leg over the saddle slowly, as if feeling the weight of the moment. Maria's heart did a terrible small hop at the sight. He could leave, he might disappear into the road, and she would keep the locket and the grief and the single-bred life she had built. She walked to him then, not because she believed in sudden rescue, but because she was tired of letting fear write her script. She did not take his hand at first. She reached instead for the wooden box on the grave and set it on the horse's saddle. A claim, not a plea. She met his scarred cheek with a look and saw in it the map of a road she had not wanted but now might follow. Stay, she said simply. It was not a surrender. It was a question shaped like an offering. Diego's hand landed near the box, then lingered. He did not promise a future. He did not make grand vows. He said instead, I can stay as long as you want me to, not to fix what's